Hi everyone, this is Christine, and thanks for being here and welcome to our 2026 season preview. This video is a recording of a live Q&A that Jeffrey, Sarah, and I hosted to give you a feel for what it's like to travel with us, where we go, what the days feel like on board, and what you can expect if you join us in Southeast Alaska or on one of our San Juan Islands fall getaways. In this presentation, we'll walk through the different regions we explore, the wildlife and scenery we are often lucky enough to experience, such as glaciers, whales, bears, seabirds, and more. What our days actually look like, for instance, skiff rides, kayaking, hikes, tide pooling, photography, journaling, and plenty of time to just slow down and soak it all in. We also included a quick tour of the David B, including our cozy staterooms, the wheelhouse, the saloon, and even the galley. And then we wrap up with our most asked questions, things like activity level, solo travel, food allergies, weather and rain gear, bugs, communication, and safety, and how we decide when it's a good time to send the kayaks out. If you have any questions after you watch, reach out. We're always happy to help you figure out which trip is the best fit. All right then, let's dive in.
Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Sarah, and I'm happy that everyone has joined us this evening for the David B Experience, where we talk about our 2026 season preview with Jeffrey and Christine Smith. And we're going to give a presentation. Everyone is currently muted and with their videos turned off. If you do have a question, please type it into the chat box, and we'll be sure to answer those questions towards the end of the presentation. The recording is on right now, and anybody who has registered for the David B Experience this evening will be getting that replay when it's available. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Christine and Jeffrey.
Hello.
Hi.
A lot of you guys already know us, but I'm Jeffrey Smith.
And I'm Christine Smith.
And the two of us together run the David B. We offer trips on the David B in Alaska and in the San Juan Islands.
And if you noticed, if you haven't already signed up for our newsletter, I've got a little QR code over there on the left-hand side of the screen that you could scan and sign up for our newsletter. But after we, I guess, I'll just block. So let's talk a little bit about the two of us, starting with Jeffrey and how he got into boats and when he got into boats.
We're to back up just a little bit, we're going to talk about the two of us. Sarah will tell you about her a little bit, and then we'll talk about the trips that we offer and where we go. Then we'll talk a little bit about the David B itself and what the life on the David B is like. So I'm Jeffrey, and I run the David B. I'm the captain. We bought the boat for the sole purpose of running it as a passenger boat, and we restored it and started offering trips. And this is, like it says here, going to be our 21st year of actually operating the David B as a passenger boat. I started out working on passenger boats in the 90s and have continued to do that through now.
And it was Jeffrey who got me involved with boats, and I started working on a whale watch boat back in 2001 through a company that he was working with, and we've been working together on boats ever since. He has a 500-ton Coast Guard license, I have a 200, and then we'll move on to Sarah.
So again, my name is Sarah. I was first a passenger on the David B in the San Juan Islands back in 2010. Hard to imagine it's been that long so far. And then I was in Bellingham and started working with Jeffrey and Christine, kind of helping them out there a little bit. I started out as cat staff back in 2012, which Christine would say is my most important job during the summer when I'm in Bellingham. But I've actually been helping passengers, such as yourselves, since 2014. Happy to do customer service, answer any questions, take reservations. I also help from Bellingham. I'm shore support, so when things need to be shipped up to Alaska, that point of contact there. And as it says here in my bio, I'm also an avid yarn artist. I do things with yarn. And so with that, we'll continue on with the presentation.
Yeah, we often say that if we gave Sarah a moment's time, she would knit an entire cozy for the David B.
Someday.
Someday, it'll happen. So here are some quick facts about the boat to kind of give you an idea of what the David B is like. We'll go into more depth with this, but basically it was built in 1929 and it was for the fishing industry. The salmon fishery up in Bristol Bay, they didn't allow the fishermen to have motors in their fishing boats. So it was all done by sail, and boats like the David B were used to be able to take those fishing boats out to where they would go fishing. Boat 65 feet long. We can go into, the boat draws 7 feet, so we can go into a lot of really shallow areas, which makes some of our anchorages really fun. We've got 4 staterooms, can sleep up to 8 guests. And one thing that we've always been happy about for the way the boat's set up is that each stateroom has its own toilet and sink. And there is a shared bathroom that people that has a bathtub and a shower in it. And then there's always electricity, so you don't have to worry about like the power going out at night. So if you have a CPAP machine or something like that, you can bring that. And then we also have a water maker on board. And how many gallons do we make? About 30 gallons an hour?
Yeah, we can make about 30 to 50 gallons an hour. And so there's lots of water for drinking water and showers and that kind of stuff. We don't have to be conserving as we go.
Yeah. And then probably one of Jeffrey's most important parts of the boat is the boat's original 3-cylinder Washington Ironworks diesel. So I don't know if we want to talk a little bit about that before we move on.
The engine is a very simple design, but it was built at the same time, built for the David B. And like Christine said, it's the original engine in the boat. And it runs very slowly, makes 100 horsepower, 325 RPM.
And what's really cool about it is you can like stand next to it and it kind of sounds like a big industrial sewing machine.
We operate in 3 different areas in Alaska. Most of our trips are in that middle yellow circle, yellow oval there, starting out of Juneau and going to places on Admiralty Island, as well as on the mainland on the other side there on the east side. We also offer trips in Glacier Bay National Park and Preserve. Also, those are based out of Juneau. And then early in the season, we also do a trip in the Ketchikan area, which is in Misty Fjords National Monument.
Kind of gives an overview of what those trips look like. That Misty Fjords trip is always in early May. Then we spend a little bit of time in May in that Tracy Ford's Terror wilderness area with Juneau, which is Admiralty Island. And then we're back there in July and August. We spend the month of June in Glacier Bay, and then we come back down into Washington State late September and into middle of October. We do trips to Bellingham. So Sarah's going to take over here for a second and ask you a polling question.
So we always like to start out with our presentations asking where people are joining us from. So I've started a poll here, and just feel free to click. We'll just give it a minute or so and just tell us where you're calling from, just in general, what type of region. It's always interesting to us where people are joining us. And so I'll just give that another second, and then I can end the poll. And okay, so I'm going to end the poll. And then just looks like from the Pacific Northwest, we have about 42% of the people who are online are from there. From the Southwest, we have 17%. From the Northern Midwest, 8%. And from the Northeast, about a quarter, 25%. And then from the Southeast. So we've got quite a wide distribution there. So thank you for that. And we'll continue on.
I'm stuck here. Oh, no. I'm frozen here. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you just fine.
Okay. Yeah, it seems to be frozen.
Yeah. So we have passengers from all over the country join us, and it's really fascinating. And in the past, we've also had quite a few people from Australia, but here we get to talk about Misty Fjords. So yeah.
So what we're going to do is I'm going to give you all like a little 30-second highlight of what it looks like these trips are from. And so Misty Fjords, it's a 5-day trip, leaves out of Ketchikan, and it goes all the way around, I'm probably going to mispronounce this, but Revillagigedo Island, or do you have a pronunciation you like? So the island that Ketchikan is on, and it encompasses Misty Fjords National Monument. So we'll see if we're still, there we go. So that gives you just a little hint of what Misty Fjords looks like and feels like. So some of the favorite places that we like to go. I put this together. So these are my favorite places to go. I don't know, Jeffrey, if you have other favorite places. So, go ahead.
We kind of move around We have to make quite a bit of distance on these trips because it is quite a ways around there. But Rudyard Bay and Punchbowl Cove, especially, is like the highlight of that trip in terms of the scenery there, really steep sides, steep granite walls, and there's a trail up to a lake that we often take people on that's hasn't seen a lot of service in quite a while, like maintenance service, and so it's kind of a exciting trail. And Walker Cove is also very pretty like that.
It's a nice place too. Sometimes we catch glimpses of bears. Those bear videos were taken at Walker Cove. Fitzgibbon Cove is a place that we really like to go kayaking. And then Yes Bay is a place that has a really beautiful sort of, I'd call it like a tidewater lagoon. You go back into the back, or a salt chuck might be more appropriate. And it's just like place that you feel like you're in a lake, and it's a really beautiful, reflective place. And then Port Stewart is this completely different feel from Punchbowl Cove, which has these giant, 3,000-foot fjord walls. Port Stewart's more open, has this amazing mud flat that when the tide goes out, you can see forever, and some really nice walks that we can take there. And then favorite things to see in Misty Fjords. So like I said earlier, the high-sided glacier-carved fjords. It also is a beautiful forest, part of the Tongass National Forest. Some of the wildlife that we see, whales, bears, there's some good birding to do there. And then in Yes Bay, a couple of times we've been able to find some amphibians. So like some rough-skinned newts, and those are kind of hard to come by. And so those are always a favorite thing of mine. And then how about you, Jeffrey? Do you have some favorite things?
So I also wanted to point out that this background of this slide is from Yes Bay. Mm-hmm. And it has this look that's very classic in the Inside Passage from the Ketchikan area farther south that you don't see as much in Alaska, but this super protected look where the trees grow right down to the edge of the water and the bottoms of the tree limbs are all trimmed from the high tide line.
So those are some of our favorite things. And then what people do when we're in Misty Fjords. So low tides are great for tide pooling and beachcombing, definitely kayaking. There's a number of places that we've been really successful in seeing humpback whales. Occasionally, orca whales will come into the Misty Fjords area. Then, like I said earlier, some bird watching, hiking. I really enjoy photography a lot, and I also enjoy journaling and sketching. So if you like doing those things, I always make extra time for people who want to do that. And then that picture with those boots are that trail in Punchbowl Cove. So adventurous people who like to do that will often send our deckhand up with that. He's quite a good hiker. And then I'll take people and do some less adventurous stuff on the beach. So that's something that we do in Misty Fjords. And then if you're interested in that this year, we are sold out, but next year is wide open. So that's Misty Fjords. And if you want to learn a little bit more, you can scan that QR code. And then do you have anything? Or Sarah, do you have anything to add to Misty Fjords? Okay, we can move on.
So we go from that. We spend a little bit of time in the Juneau area, and then the next section that our trips go to is the Glacier Bay National Park and Preserve. We have a concession with the Park Service to operate trips there, and it's pretty amazing the way it's set up. They really limit the total number of boats that are in the park at any given time. And so there's lots of times where we're in an area of the park where there are no other boats around us. Pretty much, especially this early in the season when we're there, we can almost always find anchorages to go to where we're the only vessel. Often we spend several days without seeing any other boats or with seeing only a few boats. So that's kind of why I like that area.
Yeah, and one of the reasons that we went through all the work to be able to get a concession. So, and you can thank Sarah for that, and Jeffrey, they did the bulk of the work to get that. So we'll show a little video to give you an idea of what it's like on the ground in Glacier Bay. And again, these are my favorite places in Glacier Bay, and I think they're also some of Jeffrey's favorite places. What I like about South Marble Island is it's protected, and you can find tufted puffins, occasionally horned puffins. So the seabirds are really amazing there. South Sandy Cove is a nice, quiet, protected cove that often has a lot of sea otters in it. And every so often there'll be harbor porpoises. And a few times we've had humpback whales come into our anchorage and swim fairly close to us. I think you really like McBride Glacier.
We take the skiff up to McBride. The entrance to the inlet is a little bit shallow and challenging. And so we leave the David B outside of that, but we take the skiff up there and we're able to go very close to the face of the glacier. And there's also a little hike back in there where we can walk up on one of the hillsides and look down on the glacier. And it's pretty cool to go to.
And I like Reed Inlet both for kayaking, and then we can walk up to the glacier there. And it's a bit of a challenge sometimes, but we do have hiking sticks on board because it's basically glacier that has left its rocks there. But being able to walk up to the face of the glacier is pretty exciting. And as you can see in this picture, this is Reed Glacier, and there's a photographer standing there in a red jacket. So I think it's a really dynamic place to go. Lamplugh Glacier is also a glacier that we can walk fairly close to. There's a couple different hiking trails there, but it also has what we call a glacier garden. So at high tide, it'll calve. And then as the tide goes out, there's kind of a sandbar or a mud flat that's exposed. And then that has a bunch of icebergs on it. And it's just really fun to walk among the icebergs at the low tide. And then Johns Hopkins Inlet is just stunningly beautiful. And then you like Tar Inlet as well.
And Johns Hopkins is really sort of the quintessential view of Glacier Bay, of the national park. You see a postcard, it's probably from there. It's it has a huge number of glaciers coming into the edges of it from all different sides. And then it does have the glacier at the end as well. But yeah, we go there. And then also to Tar and the end of Tar Inlet where Marjorie Glacier and Grand Pacific Glacier are. And then the front country, the area farther away from the glaciers, has quite a few little coves like South Sandy that we were talking about, and also this one called Shag Cove that we really like going to.
Yeah. And that's usually one. Most of the time, if we go to Shag Cove, it's usually on our last night in the park. And it's sometimes we've been there and it's been cloudy, and then at some point the clouds will open up and then you find yourself kind of nestled in this big, between these two mountain ranges. And it's a pretty spectacular place to anchor. And then, so there's lots of things to see in Glacier Bay. And I think it's why it's a protected area, and everything from puffins, colonies of kittiwakes that have thousands of birds in them, mountain goats, to be able to cruise by on a boat and see mountain goats near the tide line is really exciting. We've seen moose and wolves and bears. There's sea otters. So if you really like sea otters, Glacier Bay is definitely the place to go. And then the Tidewater glaciers that we talked about. So McBride, Lamplugh, I think Reed, they still classify as Tidewater Glacier, and then Marjorie Glacier. And then in the time of year that we're there, the wildflowers are really, really beautiful too. So there'll be all sorts of wonderful things to see and places to go. So here are some of the shore excursions and skiff rides that we do. And
you can see people walking through amongst the grounded icebergs in one of those little iceberg glacier gardens.
Yeah. So definitely kayaking, skiffing, and again, if you like to take pictures, even if it's just with a cell phone, it's a really amazing place to go and kind of explore. So we have 3 trips each year, and the first one we have is a photography workshop, and the second one's sold out right now, and we still have 4 spaces available for the last one.
And then the dates are up there for 2027 as well.
Yeah.
Most of the time when we're in Southeast Alaska, we spend our time in the Tracy Arm Forester Wilderness area, and then also in the Kootznoowoo Wilderness area. And those places, this area, gives us a chance to see glaciers and find wildlife that we want to see and show people. And so that's kind of why our focus has mostly been in that area.
Yeah. And then we also, we'll get into this a little bit later too, but we also have several trips that go to the Pack Creek bear viewing area. And those are special trips. So we have special permits to go, and we go spend time on the beach with brown bears or grizzly bears. So we'll give you a little preview video here. And yeah, so again, our itinerary takes us to a lot of different places. And our first night usually is Taku Harbor, which is a really great place that Jeffrey likes to take people on that first night and get to know a little bit of the history of Southeast Alaska.
We often move on and do, not quite in this order that's here, but we go and visit Fjords, which is up in Endicott Arm. And it's really fun to go explore in the back of that. It's a spot that very few people go to. And so it's got that quality of the peacefulness, but then also at the same time, it's got these very high sides and very tall high sides. And it's just another amazingly beautiful spot to go to. All these trips also go to glaciers. And so there's a couple on here, the North and South Sawyer glaciers and also Dawes Glacier in the end of the fjord there. And like we were talking about just a moment ago, we go to the Pack Creek bear viewing area on some of those trips. And we also go to a couple other bays on Admiralty Island.
And some of those other places are spots where we'll often see bears, but we might not see them quite as close as you would see them at Pack Creek. And then, let's see. Okay. And then some of our favorite things. So again, getting to see tidewater glaciers, seeing them up close and watching them calve is really, really one of the most exciting things I think that we offer. And then going into the back of Fjords, there's reversing tidal rapids. One of the things that Jeffrey plans is to go back into that area that is very Yosemite-like. You have to time it to be through the rapids at roughly high water slack, so when the water's not moving. But then we'll go ashore in that place when the tide is out and go have a look at the rapids when they're running really hard. We like to think that the rapids are a spot that is really, really frightening, but then when you get to the moment that we're going into the back, it's really, just a very nice skiff ride back there, and there aren't crazy waterfalls, or overfalls. Again, ancient forests, which is sort of a difference from Glacier Bay, because Glacier Bay had been deglaciated. That was filled with a glacier back in the time of Cook and Vancouver. So it hasn't had a lot of time to develop these really ancient forests, where in Tracy Arm, Fjords Terror, and then also over on Admiralty Island, you have a chance to experience and walk through some of this old growth forest. And then peat bogs are pretty exciting. And then you?
So in all this, Christine put all these things on there, but one of her biggest favorite things in all this is to take people into the ancient forest or into the muskeg areas and make people sit quietly and really absorb what's going on around them, and nature journaling and that kind of thing, and also the photography of it. Just actually being there and being present in one of those spots is really the high point, I think, for a lot of the stuff that we do and for a lot of the guests that are on the boat.
Yeah, a lot of times we'll settle into a nice, soft, mossy spot in the forest, and I'll set a little timer for like 10 minutes to be quiet and just sort of listen to what's around us. And very often 10 minutes turns out to be not quite enough, and people want more. And so we'll maybe go a little bit longer into that quiet time in the forest. But it was a really peaceful time, and it feels really good to be in the woods. But we also do a lot of tide pooling on these trips, and just kind of walking around and getting to know, what's in our environment. And then, so these are some of our favorite things that we like to do. So like a lot of other trips, there's tide pooling and beach walks. We do a lot of whale watching on these trips, humpback whales in that space between the mainland where the glaciers are, and then over at Admiralty Island, there are a lot of humpbacks that summer through there. And so it's very common for us to spend time watching humpback whales in that area. And then killer whales come through that. They're a little bit more difficult to find, but when we do, there's a couple different varieties of killer whales that we'll run across. They're either the ones that are the salmon eaters or the ones that are the mammal eaters. So that's kind of a fun thing to watch for. And once in a while, we'll be in a spot where there will be humpback whales and there'll be killer whales. And that's always sort of a big win for us.
We also go to the spot we've talked about a couple times already here that's called Pack Creek. It's a zoological region that's set aside. There's no hunting allowed in that spot. And it's on Admiralty Island that has the highest concentration of brown bears in the world. And the area is set up so that humans can go ashore there during the day. You have to have a permit. And like we were talking about earlier, we have permits to take people to this spot. That also limits the total number of people who are ashore there at any given time. And then you get to sit on the beach or sit in a little meadow and watch these bears. And the bears are pretty much don't care about the humans. They wander around, they do their own thing, and you get to see what a day in the life of being a bear on Admiralty Island is really like. In the spring ones, they're in their courtship time of their cycle, and so we see a lot of that kind of behavior with the males and females. And then the August one is at the end of one of the salmon runs that comes actually in that Pack Creek. And so the bears are in that spot fishing, which is really fun to watch.
Yeah. And another fun thing about the May trips is often the sows bring their cubs of the year to the meadow. And, there really is nothing as adorable as a brand new baby bear just running around and just being a bear. It's a really special time. And then we get asked this question a lot, and will we see northern lights? And the question is maybe.
The problem with northern lights, in Southeast Alaska is that in order to see northern lights, you need clear skies and it needs to be dark. And so for most of our summer, it's either very light at night because we're pretty far north, or it's overcast, because it's definitely a temperate rainforest. Mm-hmm. And so the chances of seeing them, it is possible. We have seen them. Mm-hmm. We've seen very amazing displays of northern lights, but it's also a little bit rare. So you can't really count on seeing it. Southeast Alaska is not a destination for the Southeast Alaska in the summertime is not a destination really for northern lights.
However, Neil, who I see is on this call, he has been on the boat while
we saw
amazing northern lights.
And certainly the later in the summer that you go, although we have seen them on the Misty Fjords trip one time, probably the best northern lights we've ever seen were in the early part of our season. Probably the last week we would be able to have seen them.
Yeah. And I think that was 2 years ago when there was that really big, I think they saw northern lights all the way down to, I don't know, fairly far south. And so it's possible. It's possible. Yeah. But certainly later in the season. And we've also seen them in the San Juan Islands too, in those September, October trips. So here's this year's schedule of what we have available. There's the May 25th through June 21st, that photography trip. I think that one goes to Pack Creek as well. And then we've got a couple spaces in July. And then that last Pack Creek trip in August has some openings in it, as does a trip in September. So if you're looking for bears or northern lights, both those trips would be good.
At the end of our season, we come back to Washington State and we offer a few trips in the San Juan Islands. It's a little group of islands right off the shore in the Bellingham area. And those trips are a little bit different than our other trips. They're shorter, and it's also much more urban and less wilderness-like. But we've found a number of places out in the San Juans that we like to go to that have really pretty hikes And being there at that time of the year, we're also kind of out of the main season of tourists. So there are but a few places we can go where we don't have to see a huge number of people.
Yeah, the San Juan Islands in the fall is generally, I grew up in Western Washington, and it's a really, really wonderful time of year. And the air is crisp. There's often some really nice days. And yeah, and it's just we'll start seeing the leaves turn, and it's just a really beautiful time of year. And so I really like the San Juans in the fall. So here's our little video of what it's like to be in the San Juans. Yeah, so here's some of our favorite islands to go visit. And none of these, other than San Juan Islands, these are islands that you can get to by boat or by float plane. And so they're not serviced, other than San Juan Island, they're not serviced by the Washington State ferries.
That distinction is that we like going places where you can't get to by car as easily.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So Susha Island is probably one of my favorite islands in that it's a state park and there are so many trails to go on. It's really easy to hike on. It's just a really, really beautiful place. Stewart Island has a lighthouse that we like to go visit, as does Paydos, and some nice hiking trails there. And then San Juan Islands, there is a park that we go to that was part of the Pig War. And if you come on the boat, we'll tell you all about the Pig War. And
even though this is like a much more urban kind of area, there still are tons of places where we can go and see really interesting wildlife. So all these things like the seabirds and shorebirds. We do see whales occasionally. In the fall, there are occasionally humpbacks in the San Juans. There are orca whales, and we see them every once in a while. There's also a lot of interesting other natural things to do. The exploring especially on Susha, exploring the rock formations and that kind of stuff. There's lots of, in the fall, the trees are starting to turn, like Christine said, and so that's really pretty. And of course, you put cactus in there because the area is really dry, and there are actually some native cactus species that we can find in places.
Yeah, because I think I forgot to put Jones Island down. That is one of my favorite islands. And so lots of stuff to do in the San Juans. So hiking, walking, the geology of the San Juans is really interesting. There's sandstones that have really fantastic shapes and are fun to explore. Bird watching is great. There's so many places to go kayaking. Tide pooling's a lot of fun. And then, we get to go see lighthouses, and like this one here on Paydos Island. And then, again, I like taking pictures. So photography is always up there. That's a lot of fun. And we're going to do our second poll, and that is, have you been on the David B before?
All right. So I just need to get back to our poll questions, where we're going to go as far as just asking for the folks that are online. Have you been on the David B before? Are you thinking about it? How many times? We do have frequent flyers on the David B, that's for sure. And so we're always happy when people decide to join us again and again. So I'll just give a few folks a chance to answer the poll here. And okay, I think that's pretty much everybody. All right, so just as the results, looks like about half of the folks online right now are thinking about being on the David B. Welcome, we're glad you're here. Another 15% have not been on the David B yet, but they already have a reservation. Thank you for that. And then for our repeat passengers, we've got folks who've been on the David B 2 times, and a quarter of the folks that are online tonight have been on 3 or more times. So we really appreciate all of our passengers, repeat passengers. And so with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Jeffrey and Christine.
Hey, now you know about our trips. We're going to give you a tour of the David B. I think it was last season or the season before. We sat down with some videographers and put together a tour of the boat, and we're going to play that for you next. Did you want to say anything?
No.
Okay, so I always feel like I sound squeaky when this starts. So.
All right. We laugh at this every time, the way we sound.
Yeah, so anyhow, I hope you enjoy this.
Hi, I'm Christine.
And I'm Jeffrey.
And we're the owners of the motor vessel David B.
And we're going to take you on a little tour here.
So come along. Welcome to the David B's Galley. This is my favorite part of the boat, not only because it's where I spend all of my time cooking, but it's also because where we can sit 8 people at the table, we share all of our meals together and lots of stories. One of the things that's really special about the David B's Galley is that I cook on a wood-fired cook stove. I use local seafood, vegetables if I can find them, and then I bake a lot of bread and pastries on the boat, everything from sourdoughs to croissants and pain au chocolat. Having a wood-fired stove is something unique on a lot of boats, but it's something that really makes the David B feels warm and comfy and inviting. Besides spoiling my passengers with great things like fresh-made croissants and artisan breads, I also like to treat them to fresh-made ice cream on the boat. This part of the boat is what we call the coffee area. And here we have coffee, decaf, and hot water. Our coffee is our own personal roast. We also have hot tea, cocoa, both dark chocolate and a white chocolate. And in the mornings, when people first come up and they're just starting to think about their day, I have a little journal book right here that people can do a writing prompt or a little art prompt, and it's something that we all kind of like to share. So moving on from the coffee station, we also have this drink station here. This has a place where you can fill your water bottle, wash your hands. We have an ice maker and then also a beer cooler right down here. And this space is the saloon.
This space is a great space. We've got these benches on either side that people can sit on to see out. We have a library over here. We also have a cute little gnome stove over in the corner that keeps the place nice and cozy warm. Above my head, there's a screen that we can swing around to the front of the room, and we also have a projector over here that we use during our photography workshop classes. Now let's go look up in the pilot house. We do a lot of teaching classes for navigation kind of stuff, and this space makes an awesome place for that. People can play with the plotter, they can zoom in and out and look at our course. When we built this, we jokingly called this the captain's seat over here, and I never sit in it because there's always at least one person, one guest sitting in it, usually 3 back here on this side. A lot of times in the evenings, this spot up here is really calm and nice to be in. When we aren't actually underway, people come up here and sit and drink a glass of wine, stare out the window at the beautiful scenery. Now we're going to go down and look at the staterooms down below. So this is the forward head. We have a bathtub with a shower, and we also have a toilet and a sink in here. So this is the Kita stateroom. It has 2 bunks. They have their own little sink, and they have a head over here. The next cabin back is the Chinook cabin. This cabin has a convertible bunk. It can be either made up in the twin bunk arrangement like it's in now, or we can move this lower bunk up and make it into a queen-size bunk. The next cabin back here is the sockeye cabin. This one always has a queen-size bed, and then they have a head over here, and they have their sink in the head over here. So the next one back here is the coho cabin. They have the same split bunk that can also be made up into a queen-size bed. And then over on this side, they have a head with a little sink. Now we're in the engine room. This is our main engine from 1929, the original engine in the boat. It's a 3-cylinder Washington S-step. It makes 100 horsepower at 325 RPM, and it sounds like a big sewing machine when it's running. You can stand right here next to it at full throttle and have a loud conversation with somebody. Now we're on the upper deck.
And this is where we keep our skiff and our kayaks.
It's also a really great spot up here to hang out, especially when we're up in front of the glaciers watching the glaciers calve. It's good for wildlife watching as well, just because you're up high and you can see down. Thanks for coming with us on our little tour.
And we hope you'll contact us soon and join us on the David B. Okay, that was fun. So a lot of questions is always around the food. And so I put a little video together to kind of show how things move around in the galley, and then we can talk a little bit about what sort of food you can expect on the boat.
Time for another poll.
Time for another poll.
Time for another poll.
We'll talk about galley stuff.
Okay. Well, the next poll we want to ask everybody are, what excites you about some of our trips? Obviously, we've talked about a lot of things that we are excited to show you in Alaska and on the David B trips. I want to also make sure that we did include the triple ginger cookies that Christine did post in her video just recently. But there's a lot of things to do and to see on our trips. And so just if everybody you can do more than one. You could click everything if you want. This is not a single poll. So I'm going to give people a little bit more time to answer and give us some of their things that they're excited about. And looks like we've got about half the people who are online have have clicked in. So we'll just give it another second. But, obviously we've got a lot that we share with our passengers, a lot of time on and off the boat, and some really amazing things that we get to show you in the various places that we get to go. Looks like pretty much everybody has clicked on. So I'm going to end the poll here and just kind of give you the highlights here. So it looks like 85% out of the people who answered said they were interested in scenery. And then from there, it kind of is all split out. There's a lot of people who are interested. About half are interested in bears, about a third for whales, a half for glaciers. Just getting away from it all, which I think is a really nice feature of being on the David B. Of course, triple ginger cookies. Third, you got some representation there, some love, Christine. And then other things that we're doing, of course, skiff rides and kayaking, and then lots of opportunities for photo or journaling and art. So with that, I'm going to click it back to you. And then I'm just going to let everybody know, it looks like I might already be getting some questions. If you do have questions, now is the time to start thinking about some questions you might have and put them into the chat. And then we'll start answering those questions at the end of the presentation. But I'll turn it back over to Christine and Jeffrey next.
I think that was actually the last slide that we had. And so we can start talking about some stuff. I didn't get into answering the questions that people often have about the meals and stuff. So
because our first question is about food allergies, specifically gluten.
Okay, that's a very common one. And I have done a lot for people who have gluten intolerance. And that's, so long as I know that that's coming, I can make substitutions. I can do whatever I can to accommodate you. So always happy to do that. In fact, Sarah's partner has gluten intolerance, and I've been able to cook all sorts of wonderful things for him when he's been on board.
Yeah. So again, there were no other food restrictions. I would say, though, a lot of times people have like restrictions, things that they can eat, things that they are not interested in eating. And that, Christine always makes it very accommodating, that even if you haven't told us in advance that there's something you don't prefer, that she always puts it out there, what's coming up for the next meal. And if there's something you're not interested in, you can always tell her, and she's always willing to accommodate.
It's not going to hurt my feelings. And so it's always nice to sort of know ahead of time. So when Sarah sends stuff out, there'll be a place for you to say, if there's stuff that you can't eat, you won't eat, then let me know. I do fine with vegetarian diets. I've had a bunch of other specialty diets over the years that I've been able to accommodate as well. So always happy to do that.
So we've got a couple other questions. The next question, I'm going to put that one to Jeffrey. It's about the skiff. Can you tell us more about the skiff? This is from Chris. How many people can be on there at a time, and how far does it go?
So the pictures that you've seen here are mostly of our previous skiff. We have a new one that's bigger than that one, and we are able to take the whole group, and we go out. Oftentimes, some of the places are 4 to 8 or 10 miles away from the David B, out adventuring. A lot of times we just use it to take people back and forth to the beach for hiking and that kind of stuff. But we have a custom built skiff it's our second custom built skiff. And we made a bunch of modifications to the design of the first one so that we could make it easier for people to go ashore, get off the front of the boat. It's got a ramp so you can actually just walk right off the front onto the beach, a folding bow door. And it's able to get us around pretty well so we can go explore in shallow places and away from the boat.
Yeah, and it goes really fast too.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of getting off the boat, I've got a question here from Marta about most active to least active types of trips, and in terms of opportunities for kayaking, hiking, etc. And maybe this is a good time to talk about kind of like the day in the life of the David B as far as getting on and off the boat.
We do go ashore a lot. That's one of the big parts about doing this. I've always thought that boats were great for getting you to places on land. And so we use our opportunities to go places where we can go ashore, and we can also skiff around. But lately, we've also been doing more and more kayaking in places that we've gone to. We are set up with kayaks for everybody who's on board, and we have doubles, and we often send people out in groups and places where it's protected. Like if you look at the water in this picture, obviously it's a really nice protected spot for kayaking. And we send people out alone or in groups in places like this. But also at times we send people out with a guide to take them around depending on where we're at. One of us is a guide. And so we do get off the boat quite a bit. On all of our Alaska trips, we get off the boat for sure at some point every single day and go do something.
And then as far as activity levels, I think they're all pretty similar as to how much activity there is. If there are people of differing abilities, either me or the deckhand a lot of times will sort of split up, and one of us will take maybe a more active group a little bit further into the field, and then the other one will stay at like maybe an easier place to walk and explore. And so we can accommodate different amounts of activity. And we've had people who just don't ever even want to get off the boat. I don't know why, but there's some people who they just enjoy staying on the boat and they're not really all that interested in getting off the boat. And then we have other people who just can't wait to get ashore and go and explore. So we've got the whole range.
Also, in terms of the activity, the only trip where it's quite important that you be able to hike on a beach would be the Pack Creek trips. That's the only place where we often do see bears right on the beach from the boat. But if you are interested in getting to the spot on shore where we actually do our bear viewing, there's
about a quarter mile.
Yeah, probably a little over a quarter mile hike along the beach. It's smooth, it's level, but you definitely have to be able to do that kind of thing if you were going to go on one of those trips, if you wanted to be able to go ashore and see the bears.
So we have some follow-up questions. We touched on this a little bit, but the question was from Chris, can you tell us about the kayaks and the decision that it's a good spot for that? So if you add more to that.
Almost all of the anchorages that we go into are very protected like this. There's not a time where we would anchor somewhere where there would be big surf.
Right.
Our kayaks are 2-person sit-inside kayaks, but they also they don't have a huge amount of freeboard. They aren't actually like touring kayaks. And so if it was quite windy, that would be less comfortable thing to do, but they're actually pretty safe in quite big wind.
So
but we don't usually send people out in something like that.
Yeah. I was going to say that the picture that you're looking at of the boat right there, that's in Shag Cove. And that would be a place that I would be really comfortable. Like we can watch everybody from the boat. And we always have the skiff in the water. So if there was some need that we'd have to go grab somebody or something like that, we could do that. But we often will send people with either me or Matt, the deckhand. And if that's a more comfortable option for people, if they prefer that. But a lot of people, they get in the kayaks and everybody just sort of scatters like cats. And I always like to, if I go kayaking, I really like to hug the beach, and because I think that's where the most interesting things are. So you can kind of see down below you into the water, and there's often a lot of interesting things to see there. And it's just sort of a fun way to, I sort of like to think of it as a fun way to just sort of enjoy the solitude of our anchorages. So our anchorages, we pick for a reason because they're usually calm and protected, and that they're also really great places for kayaking.
I've got some follow-up questions here from Paul asking about how do we accommodate single travelers. I guess I'll speak to that just a little bit. Obviously, in the tour video you saw, we have several cabins that can be turned into either queen or staggered bunk beds, or in the Kita cabin. We do have accommodations for people if they want to share that they can. Otherwise, if they do want to have a private cabin in addition or instead, we're welcome to do that. We do require a single supplement for that, a 25% single supplement for a private cabin for a solo passenger. But we are happy with only 8 passengers on board. We're happy to have single passengers and have several trips where maybe it's all single passengers, particularly the photography workshops. So anything more you want to add to that, Christine and Jeffrey?
I think that's pretty good. And And one thing about our cabins that you should just recognize is that, the boat's 65 feet. And so the cabins, they're small, they're comfortable, they're a great place to sleep in. And we really encourage people to spend a lot of time above decks because you're in Alaska or you're in the San Juan Islands and you're there to really see stuff and experience stuff. So that's kind of how I kind of explain the cabins to people.
Okay. Just a couple of questions from Tim. We'll start with the first one. Kind of, again, this touches on what's the flow for the day and what are typical meal times. So,
I'll do that. Yeah, I'll do that one.
Christine and the food. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So I will just start the day with my day and how it starts because that gets into the food. So we have a 24-hour watch on the boats. Jeffrey, myself, and I, and Matt, our deckhand, one of us is up and awake the entire time that you're on the boat. So Matt's watch ends at 4 a.m. and my watch begins at 4. And then a little bit after that, right around 5 o'clock, coffee is ready. And then sometime around 7 or so, right around that time, muffins or pastries come out of the oven. And then around 8 o'clock or so, 8:30, there is breakfast that consists of something hot. And then I also always have fruit and granola as an option on board. Then it's time ashore or kayaking, or if we're trying to get someplace, we'll get underway. Lunch can be sometime around, I usually think around 1:30 or so is generally lunchtime. And I really like doing soups and salads, and there's fresh bread or muffins or biscuits or something like that with that. And then depending upon if we got underway in the morning, we'll be maybe underway in the afternoon. And then when we get to our anchorage, we'll drop the hook and have the opportunity for skiff rides, kayaking, hiking. There's all sorts of things that go on there. We'll have sort of a little happy hour around, depending upon when people are getting back from shore excursions or skiff rides. We'll do that. And dinner is flexible, but we shoot for 7:30, but that might not always be the case. One of the things about Alaska in the summer is it's really late. And so we might have a late dinner because it's really hard to come in when it's light out. And so you don't actually realize that suddenly it's 8 o'clock and we'll have an 8:30 dinner. And then dinner, I do a lot of combination. I do a lot of seafood, local seafood. And then I also will sort of sprinkle that in with, chicken or vegetarian dishes, pasta, something like that. So that's it. Dessert a couple nights a week. There's ice cream, like I said. And and that kind of gives you sort of a general flow of, from my perspective, I guess it is, what the flow of the day is like. So there's lots of time for whale watching. There's lots of time for, reading books and things like that. And eating. There's lots of eating. We started this business because Jeffrey's always hungry. So anything you want to add to that?
So just additional questions. This is a new one that I have not seen this one before. Is there any facility for storage on the land or the dock where stuff we might have in Juneau but might not need on the boat? I guess that's kind of, sometimes we encourage passengers, if you're flying, to taking the time to fly to Juneau, maybe spend a couple days there, do that sort of thing. You've seen kind of the cabins, there's storage under the beds for luggage and whatnot, but I'm not sure exactly the size of what you might be talking about in this question, Tim, but, it's pretty, but why don't you add to that?
Yeah. I know some of our passengers who have stayed in hotels, they will, if they're staying the same place before and after the trip, that they have stored stuff at the hotels there. I know I've heard of people doing that before. And I don't know, it might be worth researching if there are places, if you're not doing that, to store stuff. Maybe you can talk with Sarah about how much stuff you have that you're trying. If if you've got like multiple trips you're doing and the David B is, one part of that, there might be some opportunities in Juneau, but I don't know off the top of my head.
If you contact us about it, we can talk about it. We can maybe figure out something
depending on how big it is.
Yeah. So then back to the third question that Tim had was, how difficult is it for getting into and out of the kayaks from the boats?
We actually tried to make a video of this, and we had a friend of ours be the actress for it. And we decided later that it didn't really work because she's so agile and and slight that her jumping down there and getting right into a kayak didn't really show truly what it was like.
And she was so fast. If you
she was so fast. Yeah.
You wouldn't see.
It didn't
was
work
like a gazelle.
Yeah.
But what we do for getting into kayaks, we've actually come up with this system over the time that we've been doing this. And we have a really good system where we put the skiff in the water next to the side of the David B, and then you climb down into the skiff, and then you sit on the edge of it, and you swing your legs over into the kayak and sit down. And it's actually really easy. When you go to get back out, you can pull yourself up from the side of the skiff and sit on the side and then swing your feet over into the skiff. And we've shown a lot of people how to kayak who've never kayaked before. And it's a very quick and easy way to get in and out of the boats. And you definitely end up being able to do it dry. You don't have to get your feet wet like you might have to at a beach launch.
So Paul is asking about repositioning trips at the end and the beginning of the season, and what are they like? And I'm going to let Jeffrey talk about Canadian customs and why we don't do those trips anymore.
Yeah.
So we used to offer trips from Bellingham to Ketchikan in the spring and the way south in the fall. And we've taken those off the schedule. Both countries' border patrol people have made it too difficult for us to offer those. There were too many hangups, and there were too many times where we were told that even though we'd been following all the rules, that we weren't doing things right, and it became too much of a problem. And so we no longer offer those, and we just run the boat to Alaska in the spring, and in the fall, run it back south with just the crew.
We've got a good question. I'm glad for this asker from Marta again, guessing that medical emergencies are rare, but how might they be dealt with, such as do we have sat phones, skiff for transport, that sort of thing. So I'll let you guys talk about that.
So we have had any number of medical emergencies on the boat. We now have Starlink, so we have the ability to have phone service all the time. When you're on the boat or close enough to use the network of it, obviously, you can use that, and we use that. And it's really interesting when that first came around and we started using it, when we would make calls, people were amazed because it was the coverage was so good and clear. It's actually really good. So we've used that. And also we've used the marine radio to call the Coast Guard at various times about medical emergencies. And then we spend so much time ashore where we're away from that kind of network that what we do is whoever is ashore with the group, whether it's Christine or me or Matt or several of us, we all carry little in-reach satellite texting devices that you can call out on. And so we can contact back to the boat, or we can contact somebody somewhere else in any kind of situation, but we use them if we need to in emergencies. We also use them because Christine will say, don't forget to take the bread out of the oven when she's ashore and I'm on the boat trying to make lunch. So we use them all the time anyway, but they're a really good resource for us. And so that's kind of been our system. Most of the companies that offer travel insurance have some sort of evacuation policy as part of that. And so getting travel insurance is a really important, really good idea, because that kind of thing then is covered if you need it. And we also have a bunch of resources available to us because we've been doing it a long time and we know a lot of people. And so we have float plane companies that can come pick people up, that we know the people that operate them. We have small boats, the high speed boats that have taken people, to and from that we work with occasionally. And so we have a lot of resources like that in the event of an emergency.
Yeah. And I think, Sarah, you could probably talk to the insurance stuff. You've been dealing a lot with looking up insurance stuff and talking with insurance companies to kind of help people make their decisions about insurance.
Yes. And the first thing I want to say is I am not a travel insurance specialist. I don't have the licensure for that sort of thing. But I would say certainly we strongly recommend travel insurance, both for, as Jeffrey mentioned, evacuation coverage, but also just, cancellation for any sorts of reasons, because life happens even before you get to the boat. And so what we do know is that when you make a reservation, your best coverages are best when you first make your reservation. And that's true for cancel for any reason, also for any pre-existing medical conditions, that sort of thing, if you want the strongest coverage, just in case. And I would also like to say, just kind of in the emergency conversation, is that if something is happening at home, you're always welcome to contact me and I can contact the boat. So if someone back at home needs to get in touch with you and for whatever reason there's an emergency, I'm also that point of contact there, and you've got my contact information right up on the screen there. So the one final question looks like I've got a question from Susan about what is the weather like at end of July, and can you go swimming or is it too cold?
You can always go swimming. We have had any number of people who have gone into the water with icebergs floating around us. However, I hate cold water, and I would never go when it was like that. I would say if you are adventurous and brave, it's definitely worth it to bring your swimming suit and at least jump in so that you can say that you did. We have a ladder that we actually had custom built for us that goes way down into the water. It goes over the side, but then it goes down into the water far enough that it's actually really easy. It's got steps way down low that you can get back out easily and quickly. There are very few days in Southeast Alaska that you feel hot enough that you want to go swimming, but certainly there's a point of pride in being able to say you went swimming. The weather is generally in the 50s and 60s. There's a lot of drizzly days at any point during the summer. Seldom does it get over 70, and seldom is it below 40, I would say.
Definitely be prepared for rain.
And be prepared for rain. Like, I think maybe the most important 2 pieces of gear that you want to bring with you is a rain jacket and for real rain pants. People have often brought quick dry pants, and those are not going to keep you warm in the skiff.
Those are quick wet pants.
They're also quick wet pants, yeah. And so we really encourage people to come with like real rain gear, waterproof rain gear, pants. And particularly the rain pants. Something people forget a lot. Sarah has a link to frog togs if you don't want to invest in some really nice rain gear. If you want some that will get you through the week, frog togs is great. It's kind of, I think it's like a Tyvek suit with pretty colors, and they hold up just long enough.
We also do a lot of walks on the beach, involve sections of walking through the tall grasses and that kind of stuff. And so even if it's not actively raining, a lot of that is wet with dew or wet with rain. And so we encourage people to wear rain gear a lot of the time, even when it's not actually outright raining.
Which brings us to boots.
We have a full selection of boots. We ask you when you're filling out your information for us prior to the trip, we ask for your boot size. We have these big rubber boots, almost knee high, and they're great for tromping around in the mud on the beach. We have a spot to keep them on the outer deck, but in a dry spot, so that you can use your boots and keep your feet warm and dry. And we have lots of them so that we have all the right sizes for everybody.
And we have another question about, especially going ashore, mosquitoes, which people always think about Alaska. They think of mosquitoes, but not so much in Southeast.
Yeah, Southeast Alaska, especially near the beach, generally isn't bad. In 20-some years, we haven't had more than a few times where we had actual, like, real bug problems. In South Central Alaska or the middle of the state, there are lots of places where you'd want to have a mosquito head net and all that kind of stuff. And in Southeast, you don't really need that kind of stuff. We have lots of bug spray. And
I always carry both DEET and then some more natural stuff. So
we have lots of options, and it generally, it's essentially never been a problem in Southeast.
I think no-see-ums probably a bigger concern than mosquitoes. Like we all these little tiny bugs, and we'll just like if you're outside, we set up those thermocells, and those do a really good job of keeping bugs away. And so, yeah, we don't really have a big problem with insects, which is really nice. We'll knock on wood that we still don't have a big problem with insects.
But if you are planning on going to places in the interior of the state as part of your trip to Alaska, I would read up on all the things you might want, including those head nets for the bugs.
So I think that's all the questions that I have. I think the only questions that I get a lot of times for people who are interested in fishing. So I just want to have you guys touch base on fishing because that's a common request for our trips.
We don't offer fishing as part of what we do.
By fishing, he's talking salmon and halibut.
Right.
Fishing.
It's very hard with the amount of ground that we cover and the places we go to actually be that good at guiding people for fishing. And so our general plan is that if somebody's very interested in fishing on their trip to Alaska, we encourage them to come a couple days early or stay a couple days after and go out with a guide that's based in Juneau or Petersburg or Ketchikan that can actually take them right to where the fishing was hot yesterday, because those people know. And on the boat, we do a lot of crab fishing. It's a lot easier to do. We set the traps and we come back and check them the next day. And we're somewhat successful with that. It's not super easy doing that either.
On the time of year.
Yep. It's easier in the early part of the season than later, and better. We're more successful.
There's fewer
with that.
commercial crabbers.
Yes.
But we've had people who get a fishing license and just like to sort of drop a hook in the water and, see what comes up. And we have a couple people a year do that. And so that's perfectly fine. You just have to make sure you have the right license. I'm saying the right things, right?
Yep.
Yeah. You just have to make sure you get a license through the Department of Fish and Game. And same with crabbing. People want to crab. You'll have to have a license to do that. And they come in, 3 and 7 days? Is that right?
Something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's something that I always send out to people, about a week or so before their trip. So if they really want to do some crabbing, which is fun. So with that, I want to thank everybody for joining us. You have my contact information there. If you need to ask me any questions, I'm happy to answer them by email or by phone. And then, of course, there's our website. As you saw, we have quite a few trips that are already sold out in 2026, but we do have our 2027 schedule online. And looks like I might have one more question. Oh, thank you. Thank you, Chris. We hope it was informative. We really do enjoy doing these the beginning of the season. We do start in April. If you are in Bellingham, we will have an open boat the weekend of April 18th and 19th. If you'd like to tour the boat in person, again, just contact me for that information. We're going to be setting up some private tours for that. With that, just thank you everyone who was able to join us. Again, you will be receiving the recording as a replay in a few days. And anything last words, Christine and Jeffrey, before we turn off the recording?
No, I think thank you so much for coming. And if you want to hang on for a few minutes, we're going to stop the share and we can just chat for a bit. Just kind of open chat.
Thank you, everybody, again. And if you want to stay on, you're welcome to. I'm just going to stop the recording now.